Life isn't fair. Justice is blind, deaf, and muzzled. This is who killed Teresa. In December 2021, the Sûreté de Quebec asked me to go back to podcasting and writing about Teresa's case with the goal of stirring up interests in the hopes that someone might come forward with information on the Lachance brothers and the third man in the 1978 Lennoxville event that we talked about last time, that driver of the automobile. As well, the SQ didn't know the backstory of Regis Lachance. They didn't know anything about the Fecteau murder, followed by the double murders of Grimard and Bergeron, the trial of Fernand Laplante, the fire at the Aloha Motel, and how Regis Lachance had been the star witness and, more importantly, a police informant. They asked me, the police, to spell all of this out in detail so that they could understand the facts surrounding the alleged Lennoxville confession. There's some kind of irony here that the police, again, were asking me to do their investigation. When I reflect on this, I've accomplished more in I usually accomplish more in a day than I think they've produced in over a year. It was June. It was a year ago now, June 2021, that the Sûreté de Quebec did their on-camera interview with the person we named Alex. I don't know. I can either complain about this or I can just grimace and do the work. So about a month ago, I received the following Facebook message from someone following this series I had been doing because the police asked me to. It just said, "Hello, can you give me a call? It's about Regis Lachance." Yeah, getting cold contacted like that is an anxious affair. I don't enjoy it. I check the person's Facebook profile. There's a lot of guns, a lot of bikes, and but I sort of manned up. Once I got beyond the fear that they're going to beat me up, I just called them, and it was nothing scary. Noel, we'll call them Noel, wanted to help. And what they chiefly wanted to tell me was that they thought Regis Lachance was responsible for the murder of Rolland Giguere, the fried chicken entrepreneur murdered on Halloween night 1969, Sherbrooke's oldest unsolved homicide. This is what they told me. Jean-Claude Lachance, who died in 2018, was another younger brother of Regis Lachance. Jean-Claude had been a contract man working in Sherbrooke's underworld, though not exclusively. Jean-Claude committed several arsons on behalf of the police, including the burning of a hotel in downtown Sherbrooke. Jean-Claude owned a lot of buildings in Sherbrooke, including the Claude Submarine restaurant on Belvedere we talked about in partnership with Regis. The purchase of cheap buildings, real estate, is another easy way to launder money. I'll just add that. The police in Sherbrooke were intimidated by Jean-Claude. They often became friends with him, which seemed easier than arresting him. Jean-Claude Lachance allegedly kept a bar, a speakeasy, in the basement of his house, and police were often invited to drink there. Up until 1979, when it accidentally burned down, Jean-Claude Lachance lived in a house at 2151 Queen Boulevard, which is on Route 143. It's about a half mile. This house was a half mile from where the Lennoxville Hells Angels bunker would end up. I don't know if this was the house where Jean-Claude Lachance kept the speakeasy, but a half mile from the Hells Angels bunker, that would explain a lot. Jean-Claude Lachance had the same MO as his brother Regis of burning down Sherbrooke to make money. And like Gerald Lachance, he was more than likely groomed by Regis in his criminal behavior. Just a note that Regis was Gerald's godfather. Remember, Gerald is the guy we talked about last time, the guy with the deathbed confession. Jean-Claude, as we said, was an arsonist, igniting businesses, summer cottages. He robbed banks, stole safes and employee payrolls. He is alleged to have committed several murders, possibly responsible for as many as 7 contract killings. In fact, this was the chief reason Noel did not think that Jean-Claude was involved in my sister's murder, because he only did crimes for cash. Jean-Claude Lachance was so involved in criminal activity in the Sherbrooke area that he practically had his lawyer, Jean-Pierre Rancourt, on permanent retainer, and would often badger and intimidate the then young Jean-Pierre Rancourt into making his cases a priority. Again, this is what I was told. Jean-Claude and Regis Lachance had always worked for the Rolland family and had several business dealings with them, including owning apartment blocks with the Rollands. Yvon Rolland apparently ordered several contract killings through the Lachances, some of which they refused, one of which was in Florida. And finally, it was well known in the area of Sherbrooke that the young Jean Rolland had murdered a woman. Specifically concerning the murder of Rolland Giguere, that must be, now that I've had time to reflect on everything, that must be the worst kept secret in Sherbrooke. I believe everyone in the town, including the police, knows who shot Giguere on the evening of October 31st, 1969. But no one has the guts, the moral courage to stand up and do anything about it. And if you think I don't know how a conspiracy of silence works, I come from St. John, New Brunswick, man, home of the Richard Olin murder. I know exactly how that works. It goes like this. So somebody says, well, I'd like to help, but I do business with his brother, or yeah, I know a few things, but that police officer, he was my cousin, and so on and so on and so on. And I have an answer for all of those excuses. The victims, they were also someone's daughter and cousin and sister. They deserve justice, not a wall of silence. It's really like a community players production of Oedipus Rex, right? Who will solve Sherbrooke's oldest murder? Who is responsible? Oh, you are, Sherbrooke. You killed Rolland Giguere with your silence and complicity. That's your pestilence. You own it. it's bitterly amusing to me to see reporters like René Charles Quiron waxing detective in Le Tribune, when they reopened the Giguere case, while featuring some of the probable culprits, other murders in the news sidebar. We've talked about this before, saying how do we solve this 38-year-old murder of Giguere, doing this colossal hand wringing, and there on the side panel is Teresa and Louise Camera and by the way, Manon Dubé, who's possibly the only case not that I believe is not wrapped up in all of this. So this is the version that I was given. Whether it's true or not, listen, it's the most viable lead they've had in over half a century. So I'm willing to run with it. Douglas Patrick, who was like the lead partner in the Kentucky Fried Murder guys, right? One of the three partners in the Pat's Fried Chicken enterprise. And remember, there's three guys, right? Chicken Patrick, Chicken Rolland, and Chicken Yvon Charlie Charland. Douglas Patrick, the lead guy, ordered a contract for the murder of Rolland Giguere through Yvon Charland. Charlie Charland, Jean Charland's father, then paid Regis and Jean-Claude Lachance $10,000 to do the hit, to murder their business partner. And if this is correct, then Giguere's wife, Madame Giguere's words ring very true, that her husband was murdered by someone who knew him well, and that the murderers had been protected by certain individuals to the detriment of the investigators. Hell's yes. And when I think of it, I guess that hit actually cost $10,500 for, if you recall, it was Douglas Patrick who was first in to offer reward money, $500, for information leading to the arrest of the culprit. Who could have done this? Something he knew would never come to pass, that someone would collect on the reward. Because in Sherbrooke, everything is paid for and compromised. Also remember that Rolland Giguere stayed alive for another week in Sherbrooke's Hotel Dieu hospital. Apparently, Regis Lachance visited Giguere in the hospital while he was still alive, barely hanging on, and reminded him that he had a wife and 6 children and to keep his mouth shut or harm would come to them as well. As was the case with the Lennoxville girl murder confession, where Gerald blamed Regis for the actual killings, there's disagreement on who actually pulled the trigger in the Giguere shooting. Jean-Claude said it was Regis who did it, and Regis blamed Jean-Claude. The only reason the Giguere case was, quote, reopened in 2004 was due to friction between the Lachance brothers. Regis had threatened Jean-Claude about some of his other criminal activity. So Jean-Claude in turn narked on him and called the Sherbrooke police, telling them it was Regis who killed Rolland Giguere in 1969. And Jean-Claude would have known it because he was the one driving the getaway car. At this point, the police questioned Douglas Patrick, who was dying of this. He was ill and dying of, some terminal illness. So we get another near-death confession. To relieve his conscience, Patrick confessed to police that 35 years earlier, he had ordered the contract on his former business partner. Again, multiple deathbed confessions. How valuable are there? I don't know, but nobody has any other leads to go on. I would investigate it. And apparently the police did. Allegedly, the Sherbrooke police have a deposition on file signed by Regis Lachance. stating that Jean-Claude shot Rolland Giguere. Also, the police knew that the weapon used to murder Giguere had for years been hidden in Regis's sister's house, Lorraine Lachance. And here things get interesting. Again, in 1975, Regis and Jean-Claude were arrested for assaulting their sister Lorraine, who they pushed through a plate glass window. And the prevailing judge at the time said, "We don't see that every day in a family." Yeah, well, you're not dealing with Lachances. At times, Jean-Pierre Rancourt represented the Crown in that case. 75, this is going to the very back to the germination of his career when he started as a prosecuting attorney. During the reinvestigation in the early 2000s, Detective Michel Letellier was in charge of the Giguere file. And the reason the case has never advanced, apparently, was that Jean-Claude had made sure that he and Letellier had become friends. Jean-Claude was briefly questioned, then released immediately. Both brothers were apparently also friends with Normand Plourde, the SQ fire investigator, who met with Regis at the police headquarters prior to the Aloha Motel arson. So we have these partnerships between criminals, alleged criminals. I should just call this episode allegedly. And the police. When I tried contacting Michel Letellier, the Sherbrooke police informed me that he had retired and he was now teaching police procedure at Sherbrooke University. So then when I reached out to them, it appeared Letellier had retired from there as well. So I called him up and I left him a message that I wanted to talk to him about the Rolland Giguere case. And Michel Letellier didn't return my calls. Imagine that. Just how hard did police try to solve a cold case like Rolland's? Not very. Why? Because they never bothered to truly engage the Sherbrooke people, the community, and actually try to talk to people for fear that any investigation would point right back at them. And even if they did, they wouldn't have gotten very far because no one trusts the police. The people of Sherbrooke have had a long history of being misled and disappointed by local law enforcement. They consider their police force corrupt. Despite the questionable nature of a deathbed confession, what ultimately for me makes this story so compelling is this separation from Alex's story. These two accounts are clean. They're independent from each other, but they both establish Regis Lachance as a murderer. Noel didn't even know about my sister's murder. They were unaware Regis had worked as a police informant. They had never heard of Luc Gregoire. So it's not a case of two people coming together, including colluding together. I don't even think the two people are know of each other's existence. And that's what makes it compelling. Finally, and perhaps most telling, Regis and Jean-Claude Lachance were apparently involved, according to what I was told, in the Charles Marion kidnapping. Much of the food used to feed Marion, their hostage, was fried chicken, supplied by Pat's Colonel Sanders Kentucky Fried Chicken. Charles Marion's 82 days in captivity, the longest kidnapping in Canadian history, played out in the summer and fall of 1977. But the trial of his alleged captors began 1 month prior to my sister's disappearance and occupied the Sherbrooke courts all through the fall of 1978, with the final guilty verdict of Claude Valence not coming until January 1979. At the peak, close to 500 police officers were actively involved in this case. To say it was a big deal is crapping understatement. Therese's disappearance often competed for press headlines alongside the Marion case, as well as with the coroner inquiry that was going on at the same time on Raymond Grimard, Manon Bergeron, and Carole Fecteau. It is one thing to say that Therese Allor's case received short justice because law enforcement was preoccupied. We were too busy with these other important matters. But we know that's not the whole story. When you add that one of their police informants, Regis Lachance, was the star witness for the Sûreté du Québec's case against Fernand Laplante, that the police informant was involved in an arson entrapment the week following Therese's disappearance, and that Lachance was also allegedly involved in the Marion case. In this light, it's not just a matter that the police were too busy to solve Therese's case, but rather they couldn't afford to look too deeply into local murders because they suspected that the person they were harboring from justice may have committed the crimes. And if this sounds far-fetched to you, you only have to look to Boston, a city not dissimilar to Sherbrooke, and the case of Whitey Bulger, who for decades avoided prosecution because he was working as an informant for the FBI. When the situation is framed in this light, other investigative questions begin to make sense. The first forensic use of DNA was the early 1980s, so it makes sense that the Quebec police would choose this moment in time to destroy all of Therese's physical evidence, her underwear, etc., and evidence for several other unsolved murders. Police might do this if they knew this new technology would eventually be used to trace offenders who were informants. And yes, I suspect there were many others other than Regis Lachance. Back to them, back to the police. In the mid-2000s, the Sûreté de Québec made a big deal of moving the case files of Therese Allor, Louise Cameron, Manon Dubé out of Sherbrooke to their central headquarters in Montreal. At that time, that looked like progress, and I'm sure to many it was. In some ways, it was progress. But others were no doubt relieved that they no longer had the responsibility, the burden, and the challenges and the headaches of cases that hit a little too close to home. A negative product of this action was that by centralizing all the files in one cold case unit, all the specific local knowledge of the cases was lost. Investigators were back at the drawing board and had to reinvestigate the murders from scratch. Good for eliminating institutional bias and assumptions, but bad for any chance of a quick resolution. In my own personal experience, it's taken me 6 months to get my current investigators up to speed. And this has not been the first time in the last 18 years since the origin of the SQ's cold case unit that I've had to go back and explain the case to several detectives. In fact, it's happened again just this week. Just this week I was informed that Therese's liaison has been reassigned, so now I am back to square one. Some suspect, I was on a call this week with a victims advocate group in Sherbrooke, and some suspect that this handing off of cold case handlers is a calculated strategy used by police to discourage victims' families. Is it then surprising that the cold case unit, has managed to solve a meager 10 cases out of nearly 800 in almost 2 decades? It must be of some embarrassment to the SQ because if you go to their website, they've recently overhauled their cold case website, but have since taken down any information that they used to post there about there's 10 resolved cases. We talked last time about the near impossibility of lifting fingerprints from Teresa's corpse. In fact, the Pryor family, Sharon Pryor's family, contacted me and asked me specifically about this, and I apologize I didn't answer. I've just been very busy. But the thing is, I don't have to, because I have something better than that. I have forensic fingerprints. Teresa's red wallet is still in my possession, and that's another story of SQ blunders that we won't get into. Why do I have it? The SQ weren't even aware that I had it. But I'm not going to get into that today. Focus. In the early 2000s, the SQ lifted male DNA from the wallet. I've talked about this before. And that DNA has been tested, and it does not come from my genetic imprint. So the sample's not from myself or my brother or my father from over the years handling it, which we don't do anymore, obviously, but in the early days we were a little naive. Today's SQ were very eager to test the DNA against the Lachance family. At one time they were eager. I don't know if they're eager anymore, because I keep getting handed off. But anyway, but when I asked them about the possibility of doing this, they were very cautious. There's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy that goes with that, and it could take up to 2 years to test the wallet. So never one to wait. I had the wallet tested myself in January 2022, so 5 months ago. I obtained a cheek swab from a Lachance family member. It did not come from Alex or Noel. And we had the sample FedExed to a private lab here in the United States. The rapid DNA test took 2 hours, right? 2 hours, not 2 years. The results, I don't want to disappoint you, but they were inconclusive. But that's from a wallet sample that we did, and there's pictures on the website, theresallore.com, theresallore.com. That's from swabs taken a couple of months ago. So, almost 45 years later, the SQ, who are allegedly professionals at this kind of thing, took samples more than almost 20 years ago. So they might have a better sample of the suspect DNA. More important, I think, more to the fact, is not only indicating to authorities that this kind of forensic work can be done much faster. Get your friggin' act together, man. It took 2 hours, not 2 years. For fuck's sakes. I mean, but the more important thing is I now possess a DNA profile of Regis Lachance and Gerald and Jean-Claude through his family, their family. And this genetic file has been sent to the Sûreté de Québec. They have it. The logical thing to do would be to test the sample against Canada's National DNA Data Bank, the NDDB. Whether the SQ has the follow through to actually do this is anyone's guess, but it's in their hands. Regis Lachance, more than likely murdered over the course of a decade, probably longer. And the police, no doubt, knew it and are therefore complicit in those murders. This is the legacy of what Private Detective Robert Bulak called taking investigative shortcuts. You come down hard on clubs for drug trafficking, but not all clubs, like Bob's Disco, because you're protecting the owner's son. You arrest a possible murderer for the assassinations of 2 people in Lower Lennoxville, but not the right murderer. No matter. For police, that was close enough. You punish for arson, but not all arsons, because some police have an arson side hustle going on. You drink and socialize with criminals. Then decades later, you wake up and wonder why you still have all these unsolved murders to account for. That's what you get when you choose the Brotherhood over the people you were sworn to protect. This is who killed Teresa. If you like the podcast, you can follow us on social media. Go to the website, teresalore.com, where you can find links to social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and the Substack account. This is episode 23 of Quebexico. We'll come back next time, and I'll have some final thoughts on this, and then we'll wrap things up. That'll be my last word for a while, and talking very specifically about this point in time, this region, this era, on who killed Teresa. Thanks for listening. My name is John Allure. You know the podcast. Have yourselves a great, great